The light behind the Renaissance, how Christian civilization made it possible. Let me start by telling you about one of my favorite YouTube channels. The creator is Patrick Gunn, and his goal is to help men discover what it means to be gentlemen in our time. I genuinely appreciate his videos. However, in a recent video, Patrick Gunn describes the Renaissance as the moment when humanity began to awaken from the darkness of Christian dominance. With a dramatic flair, he speaks of how the fall of Constantinople in 1453 freed classical knowledge from the clutches of the Eastern Church, allowing the West to rediscover human potential and break free from the centralized power of the Church and feudalism. Here is a part of what he had to say. Humanity's silver lining began to emerge when Constantinople fell in 1453, freeing classical texts from the clutches of the Eastern Church so that they could fertilize enlightenment in the West. People rediscovered knowledge from the golden ages of the Greek and Roman empires, causing people to rediscover and embrace human potential. This allowed enlightened people to fund architecture, art, scholarship, and so much more. This shift erased the centralized power of the church and feudalism, liberating humanity both physically and spiritually. The Renaissance celebrated human potential, aiming to break free from the Catholic Church's dominance through education, physical pursuits, art, science, and more. Now, this is a compelling narrative and one that's been told for centuries, but it's also historically inaccurate. Thanks to scholars like Seb Falk, author of the great book, The Light Ages, and a growing body of research on the so-called Dark Ages, we now know that the story of ignorant monks, repressive bishops, and a millennial pause in human progress is not only false, but unfair to the very civilization that preserved, developed, and ultimately fueled the Renaissance. Number one, the myth of a dark Middle Ages. Seb Falk opens his book, The Light Ages, by showing us a different picture of medieval Europe. Not a bleak wasteland of superstition, but a place of creativity, inquiry, and innovation. His hero, 14th century English monk named John Westwick, he was not burning books or fearing science. He was building astronomical instruments, writing technical manuals, and seeking to understand the heavens. And he wasn't exceptional. He was part of a broader Christian tradition that valued learning. Recent scholarship confirms what Falk illustrates so beautifully. The 8th and 9th centuries were bursting with creativity, especially in Christian monasteries and in court schools. Charlemagne's reforms sparked the Carolingian Renaissance, centered in cathedral schools that laid the foundations for the university system. In places like the British Isles, isolated from imperial centers, monasteries became the centers of literacy, engineering, manuscript production, and even scientific inquiry. These weren't backwaters, they were seedbeds of the very civilization that would later produce the Renaissance. Number two, universities, a Christian invention. The university is often seen as the symbol of modern progress, and rightly so. But it was not a Renaissance creation. It was a medieval Christian invention. The University of Bologna, founded in 1088, Oxford in 1096, and Paris in 1150, were birthed in the heart of the Christian Middle Ages. These universities studied scripture and theology, yes, but also law, medicine, astronomy, arithmetic, and philosophy. Aristotle, Plato, Galen, Euclid were not shunned. They were translated, debated, and taught alongside of Christian texts. These universities were often funded and regulated by the church, and they gave rise to some of the greatest minds of the Western tradition: Thomas Aquinas, Albert the Great, Roger Bacon, and of whom argued that faith and reason belong together. Number three, arts and architecture, made by monks and bishops. The Renaissance gave us Michelangelo and Da Vinci, but their work was deeply indebted to centuries of Christian investment in beauty. The soaring Gothic cathedrals of the 12th and 13th centuries in Chartres, Notre Dame, and Canterbury were marvels of engineering and design. They required mathematical precision, artistic mastery, and theological imagination. They were sermons in stone. Illuminated manuscripts from monastic scriptoria were not just Bibles, they included medieval treatises, classical literature, and natural science. Monks did not fear beauty, they cultivated it. Christian patrons, popes, abbots, bishops funded art to glorify God and educate the soul, not suppress it. Without the church, there would be no Renaissance. Number 4, science and engineering, faith seeking understanding. Contrary to Enlightenment era propaganda, the medieval church did not oppose science. It hosted it and advanced it. Monks created mechanical clocks, refined calendar systems, developed agricultural technology, and laid foundations for optics, astronomy, and medicine. Roger Bacon in the 13th century emphasized observation and experimentation long before Francis Bacon or Galileo. The very idea of rational, ordered universe, one that could be studied and understood, came from a Christian understanding of theology, a belief in a creator who built the world with wisdom and intention. As Seb Falk puts it, the medieval church was not the enemy of reason, it was the cradle of reason. Number 5, the fall of Constantinople, a tragedy, not a liberation. Gunn portrays the fall of Constantinople in 1453 as the moment when knowledge was freed from the grip of the Eastern Church. But this is historically backwards. Byzantine Christians preserved Greek philosophy and science for centuries. Their scholars, devout Christians, kept alive the works of Homer, Plato, and Aristotle when the West could not. When Constantinople fell to the Ottomans, Christian refugees fled to the West, bringing with them text, expertise, and traditions of learning. They were not fleeing from Christianity, they were fleeing toward it. The Renaissance didn't happen because Christianity was broken. It happened because Christian civilization was strong enough to absorb, refine, and extend what had been entrusted to it. Conclusion: a more honest story. Yes, the Renaissance was a time of renewal. Yes, it celebrated human potential. But that celebration was not a rejection of Christianity. It was the fruit of Christianity. We do not need to tear down the Middle Ages to admire the Renaissance. In fact, we should honor the monks, theologians, artists, and scholars who, under the banner of faith, built the foundations of the modern world. Or, as Falk beautifully writes, if we see only darkness in the Middle Ages, it may be because we are not letting enough light in. Proverbs 2, verses 6 through 7. For the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He is a shield to those who walk in integrity.